The wind howled through the barren branches of the ancient oak, its sound like the mournful cry of a banshee. Fallen leaves swirled around Evelyn Reed's feet as she stood at the edge of the cemetery, the cold seeping through her jacket. This was the first night of her investigation in Havenwood, New England, and already the town's haunting despair was seeping into her bones. Havenwood was supposed to be a picturesque New England town, but lately it had become a place of nightmares. Homes were abandoned, their windows vacant eyes staring out at the desecrated landscape. And in the town square, an old church stood defiantly, its steeple pointing towards the heavens as if in silent prayer. It was here that Evelyn met Father Lucien, an elderly priest whose face was etched with the wisdom and weariness of years spent battling the darkness. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his attire was always impeccable, reflecting his unwavering faith. His eyes, though kind, held a hint of fear. "Father Lucien," Evelyn said, extending her hand. "I'm here to help." He looked up, his gaze intense. "Help us," he corrected, his voice raspy with emotion. "We need all the help we can get." Evelyn Reed wasn't your typical paranormal researcher. In her late 20s, she was a striking woman with piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold a deep sadness. Her long dark hair often obscured a pale face, accentuated by sharp cheekbones. Despite the chill in the air, she wore a black t-shirt that accentuated her graceful neck. Her dark jeans and combat boots gave her an air of quiet mystery. But it was her eyes that drew people in, promising answers to the deepest questions of life and death. Her gift, or curse, allowed her to perceive things others couldn't, making her sensitive to the subtle energies that surrounded the living and the dead, but this ability had come at a cost. Her mother died when she was young, leaving her father consumed by grief and unable to care for her. She grew up in a series of foster homes, always different, never belonging. Her only solace was the belief that she wasn't alone, that there were other beings in this world that existed beyond the veil of human perception. As a teenager, she discovered the writings of Carl Jung and the teachings of Joseph Campbell, which helped her make sense of her experiences. She learned to harness her abilities, honing them into a tool for understanding the world around her. Now, years later, she traveled from city to city, helping those who were haunted by the darkness, seeking to bring them peace. Evelyn's arrival in Havenwood was met with a mixture of hope and desperation. The townspeople, gaunt and hollow-eyed, saw her as a last resort, someone who might be able to explain the horrors that had befallen their community. The story began innocently enough. There were strange occurrences, nightmares that clung to the villagers like cobwebs, whispers in the dead of night that drove them to the edge of sanity. Then the animals started dying, found mutilated and drained of blood, their lifeless bodies strewn across the fields like gruesome trophies. Fear, thick and suffocating, settled over Havenwood, turning neighbor against neighbor as they searched for answers. A man weathered by years of battling both earthly and otherworldly evils had reached out to Evelyn, hoping her unique gifts might shed light on the darkness that was consuming their town. When Evelyn arrived, she could feel it immediately, a heavy, oppressive presence that seemed to seep into her very being. The streets were empty, the houses dark, and shuttered, as if everyone had vanished into thin air. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant cawing of crows. She found Father Lucien in the town square, his silver hair gleaming in the weak sunlight, his face a mask of concern. Together they began to piece together the puzzle of Havenwood's torment. The first house they visited belonged to an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne. Their home was filled with antiques, each holding its own silent story. The walls seemed to whisper of the laughter and sorrow that had echoed within them, now replaced by an eerie stillness. As Evelyn explored the house, she could feel the presence growing stronger. It was a cold, malevolent energy that seemed to emanate from the very foundation of the house. She closed her eyes, trying to focus, and that's when she saw it, a vision that sent a chill down her spine. She saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed, its eyes glowing an ominous red in the darkness. Then just as quickly it was gone. When she opened her eyes, she saw Father Lucien staring at her, his face pale, his eyes wide with alarm. "What did you see?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "I saw something evil," Evelyn replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that doesn't belong in this world." As the days passed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. each new discovery bringing them closer to the heart of the mystery. They learned that the town had once been the site of a brutal massacre, the victims buried in unmarked graves beneath the very streets they walked on. The dark figure that Evelyn had seen in her vision was no figment of her imagination. It was the spirit of a killer, one who had claimed many lives and was now using the town's newfound fears to feed off the despair of its residents. But as they delved deeper into the mystery, the danger became all too real. The killer's spirit sensed their investigation and lashed out, turning the quaint town into a battleground between good and evil. As the story reaches its climax, Evelyn and Father Lucien confront the malevolent entity that has haunted Havenwood for so long. The showdown is both terrifying and exhilarating as the fate of the town hangs in the balance. The final confrontation takes place in the very heart of the town. In the old church that has stood sentinel over Havenwood for generations, the entity, taking the form of the town's founder, confronts Father Lucien and Evelyn, reveling in the fear that paralyzes the townspeople gathered within the church. The entity taunts Father Lucien with his own doubts, attempting to break his unwavering faith. At the same time, it attacks Evelyn, preying on her deepest fears and trying to drag her into the abyss of its despair. Father Lucien, drawing strength from his years of service to the Lord, counters the entity's attacks with ancient prayers and holy relics. His faith, though tested, remains steadfast, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. Evelyn, however, finds herself at a breaking point. The entity's attacks have left her shaken, her visions fragmented and unreliable. The line between the real and the supernatural blurs, and she begins to question her own sanity. Just when all hope seems lost, Evelyn realizes that her connection to the spiritual realm isn't a curse, but a gift. She taps into the collective consciousness of Havenwood, reaching out to the spirits of the townspeople trapped between worlds. With their help, she breaks free of the entity's grasp and turns the tables. The spirit of the town's founder, weakened by Evelyn's newfound resolve, is banished, screams echoing throughout the church, before it is finally sent back to the darkness from which it came. In the aftermath of the battle, Havenwood is forever changed. The townspeople, their faces etched with the trauma of their experience, begin the long process of healing. Father Lucien, his faith reaffirmed, offers words of comfort and hope. Evelyn, drained but resolute, prepares to move on to her next case, carrying with her the scars of Havenwood and the knowledge that the battle between good and evil is never truly over. And as she walks away from the town, the wind whispers through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter. A hopeful melody that promises a new beginning for Havenwood and its resilient inhabitants. The ending, however, is left open to interpretation. While the entity has been driven back, there's a lingering sense that the battle between faith and the supernatural is never truly over. The story ends with a sense of unease, suggesting that the darkness may lie dormant, but it's always waiting for its opportunity to return.